Vibeke puts the glass down on the table. She looks out the window at the darkness outside. The street lamps are on, lighting up the road between the houses. To the north, the road through the village joins the highway again. It's a kind of circle, she thinks to herself. You can drive into the village, past the council offices and the shops, through the housing area. Then pick up the highway again further up, follow itself, and turn off towards the village again. Most of the houses have their living room windows facing the road. We need to address architecture, she thinks. The way can bring things together. The whole village backs onto forest. She jots down some keywords on a sheet of paper. Identity, pride, aesthetics, information. Hey everyone, and welcome to Travel Through Stories. My name is Sean, and today I want to talk about Hanne Ørstavik's 1997 novel Kjærlighet, translated from the Norwegian into English by Martin Aitken into Love, published by one of my favorite presses for translated literature, Archipelago Press, or Archipelago Books. Love was Ørstavik's third book and really was her breakthrough book in Norway, and decades later, when it was translated into English, was a finalist for the 2018 National Book Award for Translated Literature, and it won the Penn Translation Prize for 2019. This is a really short novel, more of a novella, really, but it's a powerful book that you can read in just one sitting. I'll try not to spoil much in this review, but here's a quick synopsis. Love follows a mother, Vibeke, and her son, Jan, over the course of one night in a remote town in northern Norway that they just recently moved to. It's cold, it's dark, it's snowing. It's a really atmospheric novel. It's Jan's 9th birthday tomorrow, and he's full of anticipation, though his mother seems to have forgotten. Vibeke just got a new job as an arts and cultural officer, and she's kind of a sort of absent parent, as most of her concerns are much more self-centered than anything else. She's much more interested in finding a man and reading fiction than anything else. As the title of this book suggests, this book is really about the different kinds of love between this mother and son, and the love between them and other characters. Oh, and there's also a carnival in town that seems to have like a irresistible gravitational pull as our two characters are sort of drawn to it. And that's pretty much it for plot. Plot-wise, this book is incredibly simple and mundane, though not necessarily in the negative way. This isn't to say that there is no plot. There is, and a lot of really interesting stuff happens, but this isn't really what I would consider a plot-centric book. This book's power really comes from its minimalistic prose and the structure of the novel, which I really want to discuss in this video. This book is really about the two parallel experiences of Vibeke and Jan, as they both have very different nights. In the opening chapter, Vibeke sort of brushes Jan off and encourages him to go outside and play, which he does, thinking that his mother is surprising some sort of birthday surprise for him. This isn't the case, though, as Vibeke is just getting ready for a night out on the town. What this book does so well, and what's so interesting from a narratological perspective, is how it tells these two parallel stories. That is, from this moment in the very first few pages, Vibeke and Jan are separated, living parallel evenings that are both similar in that these two stories complement each other, and they're quite different as well, as Vibeke goes out in search of love and meets a man with which she spends the evening, whereas Jan has a series of adventures with different people. This tension between a single mother having a night out while this young, vulnerable boy meets all sorts of strangers who are often unnerving creates an atmosphere of dread as you're just anticipating something awful to happen. What Ørstavik does, though, is seamlessly move between these two storylines without so much as a page break. That is, she moves back and forth between these two perspectives with no real grammatical or visual indication other than a new paragraph that this is happening, which allows her to do some really interesting things. Occasionally, this switch between the two narratives is jarring, and often it's completely seamless. But in both cases, the switch is so deliberate that I think we can read into every single narrative switch to reveal something about the love which is at the center of this book. Here's an example from pretty early on that I found kind of interesting. I wanted to pick an example from early in the book, obviously, to not try to spoil anything. But as I noted earlier, Vipika is getting ready for a night out, while Jan is outside doing his own thing. Here, he's trying to sell raffle tickets to support his sports club. Jan boldly goes to the house of a neighborly old man whom he doesn't really know. Remember, they just moved to this town. The old man offers to buy all of the raffle tickets and tells Jan, quote, "Let me show you something," and immediately asks Jan to follow him into his basement. This is creepy, and even if you're not like me and haven't read way too much Nordic noir, or haven't watched way too many murder mystery documentaries, it sounds like a recipe for disaster. We expect something bad to happen because of this. And I just want to read a couple of sections from this particular scene, and note that I'll be cutting down the Vipika sections as they're a bit longer, but I'll flash the 2 pages on the screen now if you want to pause and read the whole scene. It's really only about a page and a half. So the old man just invited Jan to see something in his basement. He opens a door and flicks a switch. A light bulb goes on, fixed directly to the wall. Jan sees a flight of stairs leading down into the basement. Vipika goes to the bathroom and stares into the mirror. She can tell from the way she looks has been a good day. She feels glad and full of bounce, at one with herself. A tiny crystal twinkles from the right wing of her nose. She winks back. My lucky star. She picks up a brush and bends over until the long, dark mane of her hair nearly touches the floor. At first, she brushes with care to remove the tangles, proceeding then with gentle, sweeping strokes from the scalp. She tosses her head back when it's done. She wants her hair to look like a cloud caressing her face. She looks in the mirror. It lacks volume, and wayward strands strive towards her forehead. She decides to take a bath first and wash her hair, treat herself. Jan follows the old man down the stairs. They're steep. The man takes one step at a time, and there's a thick rope he holds onto at the side like a banister. At the bottom, they go through a little passage, a mat of artificial grass covering the floor. The place smells rank and strange. Jan thinks it smells of soil. The man stops at a door at the end. He turns to Jan, his hand on the handle. She takes off her clothes while she runs her bath. There's no bubble bath left in the bottle. She takes a cotton bud from a box on the shelf and removes her nail polish with some remover. She waits until it's nearly full before turning the tap off and climbing cautiously into the tub, water sloshing over the side. She feels the goose pimples as they appear on her skin, her nipples harden, and a tickle runs down her spine. She lowers herself gently in. Such bliss to immerse the body in hot water, she thinks to herself. Bliss in every respect. And then she lies there, motionless, savoring every second. You'll like this, the old man tells him. There's a daybed up against the wall and shelving full of old wooden boxes from floor to ceiling. The room smells of dust and mold. Jan thinks maybe the man's got a collection of old model trains, the first electric ones in Europe. He feels the need to pee. The man crosses the floor to a shelf, pulls a box from the middle and dips his hand inside. A leather dog collar and a metal chain hang down from the hook on the wall. Have a look at these, says the man. He turns around, holding up a pair of brown skates. Hand sewn. My father gave them to me. He offers a skate to Jan. Jan steps forward and feels the stiffness of the leather between the tips of his fingers. The skates quiver. The old man's hand a tremble. Luxury in those days, the man says. Hand-sewn leather on iron blades. Vipika rubs the shampoo into her hair, her fingers moving in little circles, like at the hairdresser's. She closes her eyes to shut out all internal stimuli, wishing to be present inside herself, sensing the world from within. She remembers a dream she had, a man saying, "You look gorgeous." They were standing at the foot of a carpeted staircase in front of some mirrors with gilded frames. There were doors, deep red, leading off to some bathrooms. They were at a party. The party was going on at the top of the stairs. There were people, lights, a babble of voices. The music was loud, but downstairs it was quiet. The man had come through a door and noticed her and said, "You look gorgeous." She felt so excited and leans forward to give him a hug, and he kissed her gently on the cheek. As you can see, I hope, Ørstavik oscillates between these two narratives to create tension and hint at the impending doom that never really comes for Jan. But it's not only for narrative tension that she does this. What we see in this scene, I think, is different kinds of love and different kinds of human connections. The old man sees in Jan a young boy who was just like him when he was younger and takes the opportunity to nostalgically remember his own life. Vibeke, on the other hand, uses the absence of Jan to take care of herself and do a bit of self-love as she takes a bath and daydreams about a dream that she had when a man called her gorgeous at a party. The layers of fantasy here seem important, not to mention that all of this self-care takes place in a bathtub, which reminds me at least of the story of Narcissus, who thought that he was so beautiful when he saw his own reflection in the water that he drowned himself. There's definitely some narcissism going on here, although I'm not sure that we're only supposed to criticize Vibeke for it. But what's more important here, though, I think, is how both Vibeke and the old man ignore Jan. It's clear in Vibeke's case, but in the case of the old man, he's not necessarily showing Jan the skates for Jan's benefit. Rather, he's showing them his skates so he can reminisce on happier times in his own youth. That is, it seems that Ørstavik is not just contrasting these two scenes to build tension and show an absent mother, but she's exploring different ways that adults use and neglect children for their own benefits. By nature of the narrative structure, this book really explores the connections between mother and son, even though they aren't physically connected for most of the book. Instead, the two characters' stories run parallel to each other, and the problem with parallel lines is that they never really touch. I think there's a fundamental problem in this book of the characters' inabilities to distinguish between reality and fantasy. We see this throughout with Jan, which makes sense as he's a young boy, as he often retells his dreams, both waking dreams and sleeping dreams, which include stories about cowboys, aliens, and more mundane things like simply walking with his mother holding hands. It's important to mention here, I think, the recurring motif of Jan blinking that is brought up in the first few pages. He seems to have an eye problem. Though it's never really clear what's going on, but it seems like a pretty straightforward metaphor on Jan's inability to kind of see straight. Vibeke also struggles with separating the two, reality and fantasy, as she constantly reads fiction for escapism, and she refuses to accept people for who they are, and instead constantly is creating false images of what she wants them to be. We see this in the bathtub scene we just looked at, as she's dreaming about a dream that she had. And this seems to be the reason why she has such difficulty throughout this novel making strong connections with both her son and the other characters that she meets. Her love of reading fiction, her job as an arts and cultural officer, and her thoughts on architecture that were in the quote that began this video, all seem to indicate her desire to construct for herself a social community with a focus on a particular view of art. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, to be honest, but there's certainly something to be said about these three things and how they relate to her relationships and to love, which this book is really. As noted earlier, both characters daydream a lot. Vibeke often about sex and romantic love, and Jan often about adventures and familial love, specifically the love of his mother. Vibeke is obsessed with taking care of her appearance, as both a mother and a woman, and it seems like these two things are often at odds with each other in her mind. Early in the book, they're having a conversation, Vibeke and Jan, and it reads, "She reaches out and smooths her hand over his head. Have you made any friends yet? His hair is fine and soft. Jan, she says, dearest Jan." She repeats the movement while studying her hand. Her nail polish is pale and sandy, with just a hint of pink. She likes to be discreet at work. She remembers the new set that must still be in her bag. Plum, or was it wine? A dark, sensual lipstick and the nail polish the same shade. To go with a dark, brown-eyed man, she thinks, with a little smile. Vibeke is a young single mother who has to fluctuate between different identities: feminine woman, careerist, and mother. I think this book really explores the tensions between these identities and the issues associated with motherhood so well, especially when we contrast all of these problems that she's having with the specific adventures that Jan is having at the same time. We could read this book and focus in on the faults of Vibeke, and I think we should to some extent. But we also see how much Jan really loves his mother, and there is a love between these two characters. Throughout this book, Jan is constantly thinking about her, and he's eager to go home and see what kind of birthday surprise she has planned for him. It's hopeful and tragic, as I think any good meditation on love really should be. Love is a really beautiful exploration of different kinds of love and different kinds of human relationships, written in a sparse and minimalistic prose that nonetheless drives the narrative forward. Each sentence is so simple, but it compels you to read further. While this book is pretty mundane in terms of plot, I think the structural way that the narrative oscillates between Vibeke and Jan make this book worth reading on its own. Alongside all of this book reads like a thriller, as the cold and dark atmosphere that permeates this narrative demands a tragedy from the opening pages. Let me know if you've read Love or any of Hanne Ørstavik's other works. I think she has a book actually coming out this fall in English from Archipelago Books that I'm really excited for. Anyways, here are just some thoughts that I had after reading Love by Hanne Ørstavik. Thanks for watching.